you don't have to be in the same machine. You can have a socket between client and compositor. So it is kind of an abstract concept at the core, and that's what the Wayland repository implements: protocol and the basic IPC mechanism. And then what we typically talk about and care about when we talk about Wayland is, of course, how we do it on Linux with kernel mode setting and ETL on kernel mode setting and ETL in the clients and pulling the toolkits and the whole big effort. But Wayland itself is really just a protocol, which is why it's always hard to answer when people ask, what is Wayland? Like, should I say it's a protocol? And part of the reason we renamed the reference compositor Western is that Western itself has all these dependencies. Wayland doesn't rely on KMS or ETL, but Western pulls in all that stuff. We read EBDEP and have all the dependencies on the core Linux stuff in Western. So it makes it easier to talk about Wayland and Western, because we can say, well, Western requires KMS, but Wayland doesn't have any of these dependencies. So it's part of having a simpler message and making it easier to talk about the components.
Right.
There wasn't even on the slide.
It wasn't even, I forgot that slide.
Yeah.
Oh dear, oh dear. So, good morning everybody. Actually, just good afternoon. Today we're going to have a little, I'm going to ask Christian a few questions about Wayland. So, my name is Rob Bradford, and I've been working at Intel on various sort of toolkit enabling, and including DTK and Cluster and Coggle, and I've just spoken about that in another room, trying to persuade application developers to start porting their applications over. And so I've got a few questions that came up, and I'm going to ask Christian and see what his answers are, and hopefully those are the same questions that have been going through other toolkit developers' thoughts. Actually, I have a question. Who here would call themselves a toolkit developer? Okay.
So,
right. Okay. So the back row.
Yeah.
This is, but hopefully everyone else the.
What toolkit are you working on there?
Enlightenment.
Enlightenment. Okay.
I can see some Qt folk.
Yeah, Qt. And I guess we have a DTK developers too. We've done that. We've done Clutter, DTK,
Yeah.
and I've been involved with Qt as well. And I guess the only toolkit I haven't really dug into is EFL, but that's because before I really started thinking about it, it was half working already. So so that's I've had a hand in most of the toolkit porting.
So let's just start off with an easy question. Right. So in the X environment, right, the way Window Manager works is, you get the reparents window, puts a frame around it, and so you have decorations drawn by the Window Manager. So you can have consistent behavior across applications. But in Wayland, I don't get that. Why not?
Why not? Yeah, there's so many things in this, and of course one of the things that people usually latch on is like the lack of consistency. It's a lack of being able to move your windows if the client hangs or takes a nap or something. And the thing about the consistency, to talk about that first, is that it's important that your windows look and feel consistent, but what type of consistency are we talking about here? We're talking about a window that looks consistent internally within itself, that has a toolbar and has a title bar and a menu and content that look consistent and behave consistent within the application. Or are we more concerned about the title bar being the same across all windows, and then that there may be inconsistency between the title bar and the content? Because a lot of the toolkits today, like if you run GNOME, for example, you have a Metacity toolbar that in the theme of that toolbar is designed to look and feel and match the content of the app. And if you go run a Qt app on the EFL app, there's going to be some mismatch between how the Metacity toolbar works and the content of that app works, because they're different toolkits. And we're concerned about the title bars looking different, but we don't really worry about the content looking different. And I think that's kind of a false concern, because I agree that we should try to have a consistent looking desktop, but it's a much bigger issue than just having matching title bars. And you need to get the toolkits to look the same if you want to have a consistent desktop with multiple toolkits. And if you can do that, you can also make the toolkits draw consistent title bars. So I think the consistency is just that we used to, that was the only tweak we really had when we were tweaking our desktops back in the 90s, that we could theme our title bars and make our desktop look different. And now we're just very attached to having that power and having that be the same across all windows. But I think it's more important that a window can look and act consistently within itself rather than across the desktop.
And what are the kind of the benefits of not having this limitation?
Well, so it opens up a lot of possibilities within the app to put tabs in the title bar, to put menus in the title bar, to experiment with these new UI features. And if you look at something like Firefox introduced that little yellow bar at the top of your page as a very unobtrusive way to alerting the user that something happened on this page. And a dialog box pops up, you have to go click it, you have to move it out of the way, and it's obtrusive. But if with a little banner within your web page, it's a lot easier to work with. And that's something that GTK then later picked up as a standard widget you can use within GTK now. So that's an example of new UI concepts coming out of a toolkit that experiments with this. And I think I would like to see something like the tabs in the title bar that Google Chrome has be more widespread. I would love for my terminal to have tabs in the title bar. And if we open up toolkits and give them access to the frame and put widgets in there, then we can hopefully see more experience like that come out. I'm not advocating that every app should have its own crazy toolbar. I'm just hoping that maybe over time we can have a standard widget in GTK or Qt for having tabs in the toolbar. And I think this is a path towards that. Yeah.
What about, and some people cite and this question came up during my talk about if the close button isn't actually inside the application, it's drawn by the application rather than being something that the window manager is drawn and is managing. Yeah. How can we go about ensuring that the application continues to respond, or actually behaves correctly when I hit the close button?
Yeah, that's one of the big benefits of the way it works with X, because the window around the application is actually managed by different applications. So if that application goes to sleep, you can still move the window around. But in Wayland, we don't push window management to the client. We just push decorations to the client. So we can still move a window around if the client goes to sleep. But there has to be maybe a special shortcut. You can alt click the window to move it around. And we can also indicate to the window manager or the compositor that this little area up here is a close button. If you click that, then and nothing happens within 5 seconds, then you can kill the process. So we still have the same options. It's not like we cede all control to the client. We can still move things around. We can still fade the window to gray if you're not responsive, and we can still force close it eventually. We still have all that control in the window manager in the compositor. We just let the application handle the actual UI of the title bar. Cool. And then there are a few more subtle issues that I could demo here if I was running Western. But so one of the things is that when we transform windows, if you go to compies that spin the cube, or if you, or if you try wobbly windows, the spinning a cube, or even rotating a window, scaling it down, but typically it's something where you end up with the edge of your window not being a straight line, being a diagonal or a wobbly curve or something. We end up seeing that the edge of the window is now a GL primitive. It means we're rendering that using GL triangles. So the edge is a triangle, and we can't anti-alias that probably right now. And it also means that we have to put a lot more triangles because we have to draw all the edges around it and the shadow. But if that's all one big texture, we don't have to change textures in the shader. We don't have to change put a lot of triangles in there. We can do a lot less geometry. And then when we have that angle edge there, that's not going to be within a GL primitive, because and then we're sampling in the texture, which gives us a smoother edge along the window and between the window border and the content. And the only jagged edge is going to be all the way out towards the end of the drum shadow, which is transparent, so that jagged edge is not going to show up. So it's also about getting the desktop looking better with transformed windows and simplifying the compositor.
Rasta, did you have a point?
What about, double click on title bar. The Windows world thinks you should maximize.
Yeah.
Another world which comes from the old Windows world thinks you should shade the window.
Yeah.
Or let's say you're a canonical developer and you suddenly think that, yes, the close button on the top left is a great idea.
Yeah.
Everyone else thinks the close button on the top right is a good idea.
Yeah.
Now that every toolkit and every client and application decides its own thing,
what about one desktop environment thinking that you should have OK cancel and another desktop environment thinking you should have cancel OK? How do you deal with that if you want a consistent desktop? And you can, for example, with metacity, or I'm sure in Line Tool you can write a theme that decides what buttons go where. So you can, if you're putting together a distro and you're concerned about having consistent look and feel across apps, you can theme your different window managers to look the same. But you can also do that for toolkits. You can, if your title bar is part of the toolkit, then part of the theme will probably include a way of saying I'm going to have this button over here, or it's going to be over there. So basically, what I'm saying is that the tweaks you have available in the window manager theming today will probably move into part of the toolkit theming, so that allows you to tweak the look and feel of the title bar widget. And then you can theme that title bar widget to look the same across toolkits, and then you're still going to have that consistent behavior.
If the application changes their Qt theme, and now their title bar rearranges, but their GTK theme has not changed.
So Ross, this is somewhere where we could come up together as freedesktop.org and come up with some policy about setting these settings up. Perhaps even we could come up with a shared library that toolkits could use to draw decorations just this way. But
we could have behavior like this, like what buttons are in the title bar and where are they? Could be part of something like X settings for Wayland, which is something we also talked about.
Yeah. I don't see why this is important at all, though. Like, I mean, even on Mac, which is relatively consistent, the apps all look different and behave differently, right? Some have Chrome trim with buttons in one place. No desktop gets this right. I think it's kind of pointless to try and solve this in a general way. Why not just say, hey, apps are complex, just live with it?
But that's desktop-oriented view.
Yeah, that's right. And on a tablet device or a phone or something like that, hopefully you're not running random X applications and hoping your XCalc looks like your,
That is kind of the point, that when you do that, what you're actually now saying is that if I want to change this, then if my title bar is now set up in such a way, all I have to do is recompile every single one of my apps.
No. There's no recompilation.
Or I recompile my queues.
You don't recompile. No.
Because then what happens is I recompile queues. So now my regression testing means I've just recompiled my entire...
Actually, no toolkits, almost no toolkits I know of will require you to recompile it to change its kind of behavior.
It'll certainly require it to go through regression tests.
It generally requires some configuration change. Yeah. My point was that each has its own configuration, each has its own way of storing and representing this data. Therefore, it's very, very likely that you suddenly get a divergence of behavior, unless we have a mechanism by which to rein in the divergence of that behavior and, for example, share between all toolkits. Look, we want your close button at the top right.
Hey, Master, if we provide that mechanism, we may be able to provide more consistency than we can today.
Yes.
Right now, the only consistency we get is in the title bar, which you almost never interact with. And the tremendous divergence you get today is within the application, which we have no control over today. By providing a way of consistently theming the title bar to make our existing X community happy, we may also simultaneously end up providing a way to provide more consistency within the application. So we're giving you a mechanism to make a consistent theme across applications, which used to only be able to affect the title bar, and now we can provide use that same mechanism to provide consistency within the application. Get your OK cancel. Right, exactly. We don't have a mechanism.
That's kind of the question I'm moving on to. I'm playing devil's advocate.
And that's outside the scope of Wayland.
Okay, all right.
Cool. Okay, well I think we've resolved this now. Yeah, there'll be no more emails about this.
No, I think put everything together.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, sweet. Everything's been set up.
So currently, the cursors are an interesting situation currently with Wayland, in that each application has to provide their own cursors to when the pointer moves in. You have to set a cursor on it. How are we going to ensure that there's some consistency there?
Well, we already have that mechanism in X. Cursor theme is something we communicate to X settings. The application loads its own cursors and sets its own cursors. The one thing where Wayland differs is that there's no default cursor. Well, that's a few points, but there's no default cursor, which is what the window manager normally says. When the window manager will set the default cursor, so that when you mouse around in an area, you typically get the left pointing cursor. And if the window manager also said that you get the X cursor, and if the window manager says something else, you get that. So there's a default cursor that you always revert back to when you're in a normal area of the application. And anything else, if you mouse into a text field, the application has to provide the I-beam cursor there. If you start drag and dropping, the application has to provide that drag and drop cursor and so on. And that's one difference, because application has to provide the default cursor as well. The compositor doesn't come with a built-in cursor, so you have to say, oh, I'm over this regular old piece of gray background, use this cursor. And that has to be in there, but that's not a concern. I mean, if anything, that's going to make applications look more consistent, because if you have an application with its own cursor theme, then you're going to get a mismatch between the special cursors that you use in different cases and the default cursor that you fall back to, because they're going to come from different themes, so there's some inconsistency there. With Wayland, there are no default cursors, so you have to set everything yourself.
So sort of related into this, and coming back to sort of the client-side decoration, currently if you have FOSDEM with the terminal application, you move your cursor towards the window, so it's just inside the shadow, it turns into an I-beam.
Oh, but no, that's a box.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a box.
Oh, okay. Okay,
but we have a box where we can bleed a cursor even from one process to another, and it shouldn't happen, but yes.
But you know, I was thinking about some of the input region stuff that we were talking about, potentially.
Yeah.
Where the...
Well, there's one more point about cursors that we're going to answer, even though you didn't ask me. that in X, we set cursors by saying, this window uses this cursor. And then it used to be in the past that when you have an input field, that would be, it's only the X window, and we would set a different cursor for that. But we do rely on, when you enter back into the window, we don't have to set a cursor, because we told X what kind of cursor we wanted for that window. But that's kind of tied into the assumption that X knows the right cursor for anything, so we can move in and set the right cursor. If we move in over here, we're going to move in and set the default cursor. If we come in from over here, we're going to end up in an area where we need the I-beam cursor, and X knows this because we set the cursor for different sub-windows. But Wayland doesn't have the sub-windows, so when you enter...
You could use regions, right? You could just give a list of regions.
Yeah, but today, toolkits don't actually do that. They always set the cursor in response to mouse motion. So you say you come from over here, and then the toolkit has to say, well, use this cursor. You come from over here, well, the toolkit has used this cursor instead. And the consequence is that Wayland can never really set a cursor when you're on its own. It always has to be coming from the client. The client has to say, oh, you're in here now. You got to use this cursor. So you can't rely on the server keeping the cursors up to date. You always have to set a cursor as you move around and enter and leave windows.
Yeah, for instance, GTK doesn't use sub-windows anymore.
No.
Except for
But in GTK, all this conceptually uses sub-windows in a higher level. But that's emulated in a lower level in GTK, so that when you move mouse around, that actually gets handled in that lower level. And from the X point of view, there are no sub-windows.
Yeah, there's no X sub-windows, yeah. Cool. Okay, cool.
Does the cursor remain the current cursor until you change it as a client?
Yes. You get whatever cursor. If you come in from one window, that cursor from that window is still set until... And the idea is we don't want to try to set a cursor and set the wrong cursor only to have the application set the right cursor 1 or 2 frames later, so we get a flicker of a wrong cursor. We want just to move in here and keep the old cursor, whatever that is, and until the application can tell us the right cursor to set. So,
Chris, what about one if that application is poorly written and is blocking, and therefore, and I move over from one application which has an I-beam, and I move into that blocked application, which should be setting into a left cursor.
Yeah.
And that is, and it's not going in. Should we have a fallback from in the compositor that after a certain amount of time we reset the cursor?
Sounds messy. What we could do, we have the ping request on the X, where we can ping an application when we move into an application, where we click in an application. If that application doesn't respond to the ping request immediately, then we know that that application is not responsive. And we could use something like that. I don't know. Again, companies used to gray out a window. If you ping the window and it doesn't reply, we gray it out and it's not responding, and we kind of give that visual hint. I mean, I don't know that any compositors today really use that kind of hint anymore. But we could use that mechanism for setting a default cursor. Maybe a spinning beach ball or something.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Cool. So. We sort of, this is something that keeps coming up, is about with window hints. So currently in the X world we have ICCCM and EWMH to communicate between the client and the compositor and a window manager. And between window managers and other special types of clients like pages and so forth. What things do you think we really need to keep to communicate between the client and the compositor?
Right. So a lot of the special, it used to be that traditional X desktop, you can plug and play pages, window managers, and panels, and they will all sort of agree on what the topology of the desktop was, and what happens when you click in the pager will send a special event to the window manager specified in EWMH to say, please move this window, or please go to this desktop. And that's kind of splitting out the desktop into all these different components you can plug and play. And if anything, we were kind of moving away from that. When you look at GNOME 3, there's no plug and play of different components. And even with GNOME 2, there wasn't really an option to plug in your custom pages very much. So we're moving away from the behavior, and we're not focusing on making that possible right now. We're not, well, let me say, we're not standardizing anything of that kind right now. But what we're focusing on is what applications need to communicate to the core desktop. So you're an application, you want to communicate your title, window title, because even though you draw your own title bar, you still may want the window manager, the composite to know what title it should print when you alt tab between different instances. And you want maybe to provide an icon. So all these basic things that applications provide today in window properties, we will have protocols for the application to communicate that to the compositor. So the things about external core components like a pager in a separate process is something we can either do as a private extension between a compositor. If you want to have a compositor that's conceptually one big project but has its own, as an implementation detail, splits out parts of the UI in different processes, you can, within a compositor and those components, define your own interface. We can also look into defining, maybe standardizing some of this interface. If you want to support a mod where you can plug in your own panel, then we can standardize an interface for this, that the compositor that supports pluggable panels can then expose, and then pluggable panels can go look for that and plug in that way. So that's how we're going to deal with those things of EWMH.
Sort of relate to this, but not they're not actually window anything expert. But what about absolute positioning of windows? That's something that's currently abstracted through into GTK. I can say, put my window here.
Yeah, you can, if you want, place a window at an absolute position on the screen. And most of the time, that's not really a good way to write an application. Typically, and most apps do this today, you will say, here is my window, please put it. And the window manager knows whatever else is on the screen, and maybe the window manager will put it up here because there's some room up there, or maybe it'll have to overlap. So the decision where to put it, and initially put a window, is done by the window manager. And it's usually very bad form to insist to put your window up here. So there are two cases where an application typically want to put a window in, well, at least two, but two important ones, where an application wants to put a window in a specific position. One is if you say, well, I'm a pager, or I'm a media player, I want to be up in this corner always. So you want to provide some kind of core desktop functionality. You want the window manager, you want to be treated specially. And the way to handle that today in Wayland is that you have to specify some kind of surface type where you say, well, I'm the media player surface, and then the compositor has to understand that and put that at that position. So we don't allow clients to just plug themselves into the screen somewhere. We want them to communicate what kind of role they're playing in the desktop, and the window manager will then know where to put them. The other option is where you want to pop up a menu, and you want to put that right here because that's where it should be when it's sitting on top of that menu. And we can do that mostly with relative positioning. We can say, okay, put it here relative to the surface it's popping up from. The only trick there is how do we deal with what happens when that menu crosses a screen edge. If that window is going to pop up and half of it is going to be off screen. So in Toolkit, we typically look at the geometry and move it somewhere else. So that's where you need the global position, because you have the geometry of the screen. This is your screen, windows down here, and you can say, if I put the menu there, it will cross the screen edge. So that's one way, another legitimate way that apps use global coordinates today. And we haven't formalized this yet, or even implemented it, but the idea is that we would want apps to kind of position it and see, what if I put it here, how much of the window would be visible? Or we could say something like, okay, I want to put it either here or there or here, and then the compositor will come back and say, okay, you can put it there and you're going to be this big. And then the application can run with that, or you can try again. So there might be a little feedback loop where the application tries to position a window, and the compositor will come back and say, yeah, that works, or that doesn't work, or I'm going to clip you. And the reason here, of course, is that if it was always just a window somewhere in the screen, we could communicate that to the application. But it could be because we're supporting input redirection, we're supporting that the compositor ultimately places a window and transforms it. It could be that the window was on a cube or bend around or rotate up and we cannot communicate that position to the client because we don't want to restrict the type of transformations the compositor can do. There should be freedom to do wobbly windows, to spin them on a cube. And once we do that, it's kind of hard to communicate what the available screen area is to it.
Or put them into a 3D game.
Or put them into
the first-person shooter.
Who
would do that?
Cool. He's not even paying attention.
Yeah, okay. I think I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, about games, what about full screen windows? Like if you really want the whole...
Yes. Yeah. Good question. But so like today, the EWM8 standard has an option for full screen where you, in cooperation with the window manager, make your window full screen. You say, I want to be full screen, and the window manager now knows that this is a full screen window and treats it slightly different. And there's going to be a similar request in Wayland where you can say, oh, I want this surface to be full screen. The compositing manager will then say, all right, this is your new size, this is what you're supposed to be, and then you can resize to that size and give the window manager that new window. And one of the cool things we can do in Wayland is once you do that, we can, instead of compositing the desktop and doing a lot of rendering per frame, we can just use that as the frame buffer for that output, because we control the mode settings. So once we have that buffer, we put it up right there and we paste flip directly to that buffer, and there's no rendering or anything going on in the compositor to slow your game down.
Just like X.
Except without all the horrible flicker from the make semantics.
No, if you have full screen expedite, you get the same behavior, you get page flipping.
Yeah, but we can make this decision on a frame by frame basis. We can say, even if you're dragging this window and it just transiently matches up with the full screen, we can say, okay, page flip to this for this frame, and next window you move it up here, and next frame you move it a little further up, and we can say, oh, we have to composite now, we have to do the render. We can do this on a frame by frame basis because we page flip every frame. It's nothing unusual for us. We just page flip to a different buffer than the one we normally would, but we page flip every frame, so we just make a different decision on what to page flip to for that frame. So there's no flicker. We don't send out expose events or clipping changes to other clients when we make this decision. They don't see anything. It just happens, and it's surprisingly simple.
You have flicker? You must have bad drivers.
We have no flicker.
No, I mean in X. If you disable compositing for a full screen window,
Yes.
and you have flickering, you must have bad drivers.
Yes.
Sure.
Sure. We don't have any bad drivers there.
So according to EWMH, full screen, is this full screen with no bar or anything else? Because there could be compositing in the start menu or something else on the screen. So is this proper full screen? Or?
Yeah. Well, the exact behavior, what happens if you go from a full screen window to an overlap window is that if you find a different window here and you start moving it around and you still have a full screen, maybe we keep that in the background, we move the panels on top of that full screen window.
So you go back to basically render that, to give the application the modality for rendering.
Well, I think that's part of the compositor policy. I mean, if you go full screen, you may still want to alt tab back to a different, you may need drag a terminal on top of your full screen window. Then you're interacting with that terminal that has the keyboard focus and task focus. But you still want to keep the full screen window in the background. Yeah, and when you do that, you want to move the panels or menus on top of that from the desktop environment. When you go back to the full screen window, you put it back on top and nothing else is visible.
And what kind of full screen is it? Over one monitor, over two monitors, over all monitors?
Oh, so the full screen request is per output. If you want to go full screen across several monitors, you have to have a surface per output.
And how do you get information that you have multiple monitors?
Yes, that's in the
front.
Yeah. We give applications the information about the geometry. These are the outputs you have, and the window will also always know what output is currently on. So it doesn't know exactly where it is, but you're going to know if you're on the projector or you're on the back of the laptop stream, or if maybe you're overlapping both of them. So you're going to have information about what outputs are there, how they aligned to each other, and which of the outputs are you currently on. So and from there you can say, okay, go full screen on the output I'm currently on, or you can say go full screen on the other output, or you can give the user an option of different outputs you want to go full screen on, or you can provide a full screen image for all of the outputs you want to be. So there's a lot of options.
Well, I think actually we're almost out of time, which is fine because the only other issue that It's very easy. We don't.
Graphs.
Yeah, it's not a problem, is it?
No,
I mean,
whoever had problems with graphs.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so yeah, we try not to do graphs in Wayland because it is sort of a big sledgehammer that is applications basically take the server for themselves and get all input into their window and all keyboard and mouse input, and only until they let go will that input go somewhere else. And if that client decides to sleep or hang, well, we're stuck with all input going to that window. And that's something we like to avoid. We like to not get into a situation where one window can monopolize all input, and there should always be a way to get out of that situation. So fortunately, and there's not a lot of legitimate use cases for graphs. The only one is pop-up menus where you want all input to the window. And typically what happens when you click outside that window is that graph will be broken by the toolkit. And instead of having the toolkit do that, we're going to introduce a new pop-up surface so that the compositor knows that once this is up, all input goes to that surface. But if you go and click outside that surface or in a different application, we send that event to the application that this pop-up is now done. Move it out of the way, and the toolkit can then remove it and clean up from that. But we're never going to get, if the toolkit is broken, or if that application is asleep, what's going to happen is that the pop-up may stay there, but as you click outside the window, the graph is going to be broken, and you can move that application out of the way and force close it. So it's possible to get out of that situation.
Don't games also use graphs now?
Games use graphs, but the typical use case is that they want to get relative input events, because you have it. When you're moving the mouse, you don't want your full screen shooter to stop moving once your mouse hits the screen edge. So what they do is, and also if you're playing window, you don't want your mouse to move out of the window and then your full screen shooter to stop moving. So they grab the mouse so that they can keep warping it into the center, and then as you move.
There are like games like StarCraft where you still want to keep the mouse inside the window, but
yeah,
you're not using relative.
Yeah.
That can be just part of full screen. If you're asking for full screen, that is what you get.
Yeah. You can play StarCraft window, I guess. Yeah. And then you want to keep the mouse behind it.
I guess that's a specific use case.
Yeah.
If it's in a window, you want
so yeah, the point is that you want to keep in the window, so you can, because when you hit the edge in StarCraft, you're scrolling, right? That's how you scroll through the map. So you don't want to leave the windows.
Hey, so why don't we continue this conversation in the bar?
Oh yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Yeah.
Luke, has that Chris showed up yet?
Yeah,
Okay. Actually, I probably will just move out there then.